Hi, today we are going to learn about an artist. His name is Claude Monet. He was born in Paris, France in November of 1840. He was a second generation Parisian. His father worked in a grocery store and his mother was a singer. His mother died when he was 16 years old and his father wanted him to join the grocery business. But that wasn't something that he was interested in, and instead he went to an arts school for a little while. Eventually he was drafted into the army and he went to Algeria to fight in the war. But after getting typhoid fever after about a year, his aunt actually paid some money so that he could be relieved of his military duty, which was something that they could do back then. He was supposed to serve for 7 years, but only served for 1. One of the conditions of coming back was that he had to go to another art school and to study. At that time, he met other artists like Renoir and Monet, and he was able to start painting outdoors. Before this, most painting was done indoors in studios, and this was the first time in the history of art that people had really set up their easels and their paints outside. When he was younger, he used to do charcoals, but as he got older, Renoir and others encouraged him to take up oil painting, which is what he did. He moved quite a bit. He spent some time in Paris. He also spent some time in England and also in the Netherlands, in Amsterdam. He would spend time with other artists and perfecting his craft. He was married in 1870 to a woman named Camille, and they had 2 children, but she died of cancer at the age of 32 when he was still relatively young. And he said it impacted his art quite a bit. One of his sons died, I think in 1914. And so he was still pretty young. And Monet, he died probably about 10 or 15 years after his son. So he outlived his son. He had another son, his name was Michel, and he left everything to him when he died in, I believe, 1926. So for the first half of his life, he spent time mostly in Paris, but in other parts of Europe, like we talked about, in England and in the Netherlands. So he was really getting sick of Paris, and he moved to like another little suburb just outside of Paris, but wasn't really impressed with that. And one day when he was on the train, he saw this beautiful place called Giverny. And so he decided that he wanted to live there. He thought it was beautiful. So he bought an estate, and it was about 2 acres of land, which isn't huge, but it's a decent amount. And he lived there for over 40 years. And while he lived there, he did over 200 paintings of his gardens. Around the age of 60 years old, he started to get cataracts and lose his eyesight. And because of that, it started to change his paintings. They started to have a bit of an orange tinge to them. And he also had to make his paintings huge. Some of them were 40 feet wide, which is, I mean, I can't really show you, but your classroom is probably just a little bit over 40 feet wide, or approximately. So it was really, really big paintings that he was doing so that he could actually see what he was doing at the end of his life. This one right here is called Gardens. I think it's called Gardens at Giverny. I think this was painted in approximately the year 1900. And this is just one of many. If you were to look him up on the internet and Google or Wikipedia, you could see hundreds of paintings that he painted of his gardens. He especially loved to paint the water lilies in the water, the ponds on his property. So we're going to take a look at the painting, but we're also going to kind of talk a little bit about a color wheel. So most of us are familiar with our primary colors like red, yellow, and blue. And then when we're little, we learn about how if we combine red and yellow, we get orange. And if we combine blue and purple, we're going to get, or blue and red rather, we will get purple. And when we combine the blue and the yellow, we can get green. But you can continue to add a little bit more yellow to the green and it makes a yellow green. You can add a little bit more red to the purple and it kind of pulls a little bit more of like a maroon or a burgundy color. And that's how we come up with all of the colors on the color wheel. But some of the colors, they tend to be considered what we call cool colors, and some are considered to be warm colors. So this painting is going to have a blend of cool and warm colors. So we're going to talk a little bit about the colors in this painting. All right, so we've got these blues and purples, and these are going to be considered our cool colors, okay? And we're going to have this dirt path right here. It's kind of brown, right? And we've got these greens and browns in the trees, and these are going to be our warm colors. This painting is in the style of it's called Impression, okay? Impressionism sometimes. The reason it was called that is actually because of a painting that Claude Monet did, and it was called Impression Sunrise. So they had an art gallery, and he had his artwork there, and one of the critics saw it, and he named this movement of this type of art called Impressionism. The reason that it came up with his own name is because before this, we didn't have the invention of the camera. So we didn't have the ability to take pictures of things. So most artists, they would paint things very literally. So they wanted them to look like real life. And that was the best way that people could actually, you know, almost like visit a place that they had never been before. This was before air travel. So if somebody went to some amazing place and they painted this gorgeous landscape, then it would be a way for people to see it. And now for the first time, they don't need to do that as much because they can take a photograph. And so now the artists are kind of allowed to show their impressions, more of their feelings. And they would do this with the oil paints, and they would take their paintbrushes and they would take huge globs of paint. Sometimes they would even just use knives, and they would spread it on here. And it can be really hard to see, but it's very textured, and the paint would kind of stick out of the canvas, sometimes like as thick as this, just in huge globs. And it would take a long time to dry. So he would paint these outdoors instead of in the studio. And this was obviously in his garden, and he would do big, huge globs of paint. And so if you were able to see it in person and you could see it up close, then you would see big, huge textures. So I don't really have a lot more to add to it, but I hope that you guys enjoyed it. And I hope that if you guys get a chance, that you could maybe look up some of his other pictures and maybe something with the water lilies or something else. But he lived to be quite, to an old age. I think he lived to be about, he would have been 86 years old when he died in 1926. And he is one of the most famous artists of the Impression era. And I hope that you guys enjoyed the presentation today. Bye.